Hi, my name is Mandy Kern and I'm the Program Specialist at the Kansas Wetlands Education Center. Thanks to funding from the Dorothy M. Morrison Foundation, I was able to write this book about a migrating American avocet. Also thanks to the funding, every classroom K through 6 and school library in Barton County will receive a copy of this book. Schools and public libraries within 70 miles of the center outside of Barton County will also receive a copy of this book for free, as well as some educational programming to go along with the book. The copy that I'm reading tonight is just a proof. The illustrator is still working on some last images, and we've already made some edits to the text from what you'll hear tonight. But if you're interested in pre-ordering a copy for your very own collection, information is provided. Ava, A Year of Adventure in the Life of an American Avocet by Mandy Kern and illustrated by Annalee Nicklin. The Kansas Wetlands Education Center is dedicated to educating the public about wetland communities, their importance, and the need for conservation and restoration, with emphasis on Cheyenne Bottoms and Quivira National Wildlife Refuge. KWEC accomplishes this through interactive exhibits and interpretation, education programs, outreach, and fostering partnerships with cooperating stakeholders. The KWEC is located at 592 Northeast K156 Highway and is at the southeast side of Cheyenne Bottoms Wildlife Area, northeast of Great Bend, Kansas. Visit wetlandscenter.fhsu.edu for more information. Photos in this book were provided by Wendell Hinkson, Jonas Kern, Joseph Kern, Mandy Kern, the Kansas Department of Wildlife Parks and Tourism, Park Elementary Drone Club, Joseph Thomason, and Dan Witt. As the sun rises over the Laguna Madre, which stretches along the coast of Texas and Mexico, the elegant Ava preens, anxiously awaiting to embark on her adventure. Ava is an American avocet. She shares her winter home with hundreds and thousands of shorebirds in one of 6 lagoons in the world that is saltier than the ocean. The birds navigate the mangroves in the hypersaline water, gathering and readying for spring migration. Ava looked around the estuary, rich with flora and fauna. Crabs, shrimp, and fish were plentiful in the shallow stands of seagrass. Even though she could see everything that the wetland provided, Ava felt a pull to fly north with the other avocets to find mates, food, and nesting ground. Migration can be difficult. Storms, loss of habitat, and even power lines can be hazards. But it was time to leave her beloved Laguna Madre in the Gulf of Mexico. Avocets are not marathon flyers and migrate only medium-range distances at a time. The algae mats at the Salt Plains National Wildlife Refuge in Oklahoma provided an opportunity to rest and feed for not only the avocets, now 800 miles from their winter grounds, but also for willets, greater yellowlegs, and sanderlings. All could be seen foraging for invertebrates in the biofilm of the shallow pools. Ava's adventures continued for another 200 miles. Ava was ready to stop for a rest on a dreary morning flight when the clouds in front of her cleared. She saw an amazing sight. A huge wetland was calling her down. This was the 41,000-acre basin, a freshwater marsh called Cheyenne Bottoms in the middle of Kansas. As she slowed and circled, she took note of her surroundings. In a sea of cattails, great blue herons, double-crested cormorants, and great egrets greeted her as she landed. As the largest wetland complex in the interior of the United States, Cheyenne Bottoms is a crucial stopping point on the Central Flyway for millions of birds during their annual migrations in the spring and fall. The surrounding 100-foot-high bluffs create a natural land sink that captures water from area creeks. Its shallow pools and mudflats make Cheyenne Bottoms the perfect habitat for shorebirds like Ava. Some facts about wetlands. In only 23 years between 1955 and 1978, 40% of the wetlands in Kansas disappeared. Wetlands around the world are vanishing at a rate 3 times that of forests. Wetlands are one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet, as varied and productive as rainforests and coral reefs. Wetlands do amazing things for their surrounding communities, such as reduce soil erosion by capturing sediment and soaking up extra floodwater. The relatively calm wetland waters allow toxins to settle to the bottom, in effect cleaning the water that flows out again. Wetland plants help by acting as traps or filters. Measuring less than 1% of the state's area, Kansas wetlands support more wildlife diversity than the remaining 99%. Ava didn't realize it, but Cheyenne Bottoms was the third Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network site she visited during her migration. These sites, located throughout the Americas, are important in the protection of habitat essential to birds like Ava. WISRN was created to reduce the changes humans have made to the environment and to ensure there are locations for birds to stop, rest, feed, and breed along their migration routes. Thankfully, the American Avocet is a species of low conservation concern because their numbers are strong. Ava surveyed her surroundings. There were so many different kinds of birds. The long-billed curlew was probing for worms with its impossibly long, thin, curved beak. The Wilson's phalarope spun in circles, creating a vortex that brought their favorite snacks, aquatic invertebrates, to the surface. The sharp cries of "Killdeer, killdeer" caught her attention as a tan bird with a white chest topped with 2 black bands shouted at a speckled kingsnake approaching its nest. The killdeer's mate flopped away as if he had had a broken wing, a trick to lure the snake away. Ava knew the relief of the Hudsonian godwit as it found a good feeding spot in the mudflat. Godwits fly thousands of miles non-stop, going days without rest, and they depend on Cheyenne Bottoms for a break and a meal before they continue on their journey further north. She watched as a flock of American white pelicans herded fish and scooped them up, tilting their bills to swallow them whole. What Ava did not notice was a spooked American bittern who was camouflaged amongst the bulrushes, swaying in the breeze. This wetland of international importance is a welcome respite for so many migrant species. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed him, with his rusty-colored head, his black and white wings, and bluish-gray legs. Ava stopped in her tracks, lowered her head, and extended her neck. She wanted to get to know him. This male Avocet started preening his wings and splashing water in a frenzy. He was signaling to Ava that they would be a perfect match. Circling, they started dancing, beak to beak, and he placed a wing on Ava's back. Ava and her new mate waded to one of the raised islands in the marsh. They selected an area with very little vegetation, the male making several scrapes in the ground with his breast and feet until they both agreed on the perfect spot. They made more shallow depressions in the soil, and together they collected a few stems of smartweed. They found some beautiful white feathers a snowy egret left behind, and finished decorating their humble nest with a few pebbles. Over the next few days, Ava laid 4 greenish-brown eggs with irregular dark brown and black spots. Each egg had one very pointed end, which is a trait of shorebird eggs. As they are laid on the ground in shallow nests, the shape prevents them from rolling out of the nest and off the island if they are bumped. In about 28 days, Ava and her mate would become parents. Male and female Avocets take turns incubating and sitting on the nest during the day. As there were no trees or bushes to provide shade, she dipped her belly feathers in the water to help keep the eggs cool when the temperatures rose. Ava sat on the nest at night. The next morning they awoke to a howling wind. Rain came pelting down, down, and down some more. The water level began rising. Ava was scared. The island was disappearing. Ava and her mate rushed to gather sticks and find more feathers, working together frantically to raise the nest just enough to get the eggs to safety. The rain continued all day, but the nest was safe. Their hustle had worked, and all was clear for the night. Or was it? Wetlands are important places for many animals, as well as birds. Cheyenne Bottoms is home to at least 44 mammal species. Avocet eggs were on the midnight snack menu for this raccoon. Ava was again in a fight to save her new family. Crouching down and stretching out her neck, Ava extended her wings to their full 2 feet, ruffled her feathers, and ran directly at the raccoon. Her teetering gait surprised the critter, but even more startling was her shrill "cleek, cleek, cleek" cry of alarm. It increased in pitch as she moved, making it sound as if she was approaching fast. Quite the trick for an angry mama defending her nest. It worked! After 3 weeks of protection, care, and excitement, the day arrived. 4 little downy chicks peered over the edge of the nest. Within hours, the precocial brood began testing out their long, awkward legs. Out for a swim, the parents watched as the cinnamon-headed Avocet chicks dove under the water when a northern harrier swooped down low, gliding over the wetlands looking for prey. In a month, the chicks would be strong enough to fly off on their own adventures. Until then, both parents would watch over the young and teach them all they knew. With the chicks able to feed themselves, the family set out in the muck of the flats in search of food. Near some ring-billed gulls, the family mixed with a flock of Avocets. Their slightly webbed, splayed feet moved through the water without disturbing it as the birds swept their heads from side to side, moving their beaks through the shallow water. They found their food by touch and pulled a mix of aquatic insects and crustaceans from the mud. A few Avocets could be seen plunging their heads underwater looking for prey. One even snatched a passing dragonfly right out of the sky. Colonies of black-necked stilts also feed in the mudflats. This cousin to the American Avocet is very dignified in appearance with their tuxedo-like plumage and rosy pink legs. Stilt legs are the longest, relative to body size, of any North American bird. Cheyenne Bottoms is abundant with food for its diverse population of guests. Dragonfly naiads swim near the vegetation. Mayfly nymphs in their last instar stage are molting at the water's edge. Crayfish chimneys dot the banks. Water boatmen row their arms down the water column with a bubble of trapped air, allowing them to stay underwater for long periods of time. One little chick successfully tugs the larva of a non-biting midgefly out of the mud. These bloodworms are so dense that in the hot summer months, over 65,000 of the bright red macroinvertebrates can be found in each square meter of muck at Cheyenne Bottoms. That's 61 tons, or the equivalent of 3 dump trucks worth of food available each month. No wonder shorebirds love Cheyenne Bottoms. As summer neared an end, the chicks fledged off on their own to join other juvenile Avocets. Ava noticed that her mate's rusty-colored head and neck, like her own, had molted to a striking grayish-white. Ava's adventures at Cheyenne Bottoms had come to an end. Even though she enjoyed the ample food supply and diversity of life the marsh provided, the harsh Kansas winter would be too much for an Avocet. It was time to migrate south for the winter. Fall is an ever-changing scene at Cheyenne Bottoms. The rolling, trumpeting calls of the sandhill cranes as they pass overhead can be heard from miles away. The greater white-fronted geese arrive in droves, and bald eagles soon appear, following the incoming flocks of waterfowl. American coots dot the landscape of the marsh, and the reptiles and amphibians of the wetland find safe places to brumate for the winter. After a long flight south, Ava arrived at the Laguna Madre. Next spring, the cycle would begin again. Hundreds of American Avocets would embark to Cheyenne Bottoms, some for a brief stay, migrating as far north as Canada, while others would nest and start their own families among the reeds of this globally important bird area. And then in the back of the book, we have a little bit more information. Of course, Cheyenne Bottoms is the main focus of our story, but the other 2 sites that Ava visited were chosen because they were wizard sites. And these Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network sites are very important because they really do connect critical shorebird habitat. We're located in the Central Flyway, and so it's really important that there are multiple places for these birds to stop and rest and feed throughout their journey and their migration. And so the Laguna Madre was chosen as one of the more southern points of the range for an American Avocet. And then the Salt Plains National Wildlife Refuge falls in between the Laguna Madre and Cheyenne Bottoms, and it was chosen because of its wizard status. The book also includes a glossary. And originally we were going to have some pictures and photographs and more educational text embedded onto certain pages, and I found that they were just really distracting with the beautiful illustrations that Annalie had completed, and so there was some room in the back of the book and the glossary to add those, and so a little bit more information about some of the sites that were visited, some information about the plants was going to be on the page with the smartweed, and just really talking about how many wetland plants have some special adaptations that allow them to grow in really wet conditions. And likewise, on the aquatic invert page, we were going to talk about bioindicators. It's one of the favorite programs we do at the Kansas Wetlands Education Center, letting campers or visitors or students get into the water. We provide waders for them and all the collection supplies, and they can get in and really look for these bioindicators, determining whether our water is healthy or polluted. And so it's always a favorite to get those under the microscope and let the kids really experience some of our non-bird species in the wetlands. And then some information on the Ramsar Convention and how we were designated as a wetland of international importance. The back cover of the book includes a quote from Robert Penner, the Avian Conservation Manager for the Nature Conservancy, and he said, "Cheyenne Bottoms is one of the most important shorebird migration points in the Western Hemisphere and serves as a key link in a chain of wetlands throughout the Central Flyways. Historically, as many as 500,000 shorebirds used this marsh during years in which habitat conditions were favorable. Threats to shorebirds have become more diverse and widespread in recent decades and pose serious conservation challenges. Unregulated hunting, predators, human disturbance, habitat loss, and climate change threaten these birds' survival." 41 species of shorebirds have been observed at Cheyenne Bottoms. They have a preference for wet habitats, shorelines, and mudflats, and are characterized by their long legs and probing bills for feeding as they wade through shallow water. The American Avocet was chosen for this book because it is the bird featured on the logo for the Kansas Wetlands Education Center.